Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is,
Salam.
this is your brother Nafis Abu Zaid. Here with my other two co-hosts.
Aqil Ingram.
And back again, Abdul Haq Baker.
Now, this is the Fajr Club. Alhamdulillah, this will be a continuation of episode 4, which was a discussion that was talking about the second stage within our brother and co-host Dr. Abdul Haq Baker framework, which was the second stage which is the youthful stage of the cognitive model. And we're going to do a continuation expanding upon that, this time with our brother with his input added in. So if Dr. Abdul Haq Baker, if he's up to speed and he wants to bring in, little preliminaries or introductions and add his, we can go ahead and start with him, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Continuing from last week, and I saw that as an engaging discussion there. The second stage being the youthful stage, I think this is going to evoke quite a lot of discussion because it's where many move to after conversion, reversion, and they remain at thinking that's where they can basically posit themselves and say, right, I'm a complete individual now in view of the level of activism that they may be involved in and the amount of abstract information that has come to them, which they're now implementing in the societies or communities that they're living in. And the reason that's problematic is because there is a continuity and an end stage or the mature stage that they need to arrive at. But they're amongst communities that are either at the same stage that they are, or they may be more advanced, or if they're starting up new communities and new networks, maybe at the beginning founding stage. So the idealism that's at this second stage, this youthful, exuberant, idealist stage, can be very positive or negative, depending on the environment and depending on who these individuals and communities are connected to. So what do I mean here? So imagine now, we come to the deen, we're new converts, we've gone through the founding stage, that very hype, abstract stage. And we've been in that stage for a while, and we're seeing in our community that the dawah is needed. There are not many Muslims around. So we start learning rudimentaries, we may be speaking to some students of knowledge and everything like that. And then we start really opening up and we say, okay, do you know what? Now we need a base. Now we need a base. So we open up that base and we're active now. We are active. And the people who are coming in are at a stage behind us. So then that puts us in a paradigm that we have knowledge and we continue to act and move on that knowledge, which remains abstract, which remains at the youthful stage. Now, you may then have others come to the three of us, as an same with the example, who are at the adult stage, and they're saying, look, slow down, you need to have these things in place, you need to connect this way. And we start ostracizing that individual or those individuals who are at that advanced stage than us, because we don't recognize it. We think we are there. So this second stage of activism, as I said, it's still idealistic, it's very abstract, and it can become very dangerous. And we've seen examples of this. We've seen communities, we've seen individuals go through exactly the scenario that I've explained there, and then they become very, very haughty and disdainful of anyone coming with a different approach. And you see this groupthink mentality come in where people and others are dealt with suspicion. This includes those they may have been learning from or getting initial knowledge from at the founding stage. They will start to ostracize students of knowledge who may have come among them. They may start to ostracize scholars that they once referred to. So they've already disconnected from the wider non-Muslim community because we're Muslims, pure, this, and they've got an understanding, a misunderstanding of how to engage, disconnect, wala wal bara, with the wider society. Then they start doing that amongst the much microcosmic, closer circle that they were once amongst, or they were once engaging with when they became Muslims. So this stage here is one I think you gave attention last week. It's very important to pay attention at this stage because an individual can go one of two ways, or even three ways. The middle way, the third way being that balanced way, and developing incrementally. One could be that they go to an extremism of with the information. I'm not going to say knowledge. They think it's knowledge. The information they've acquired, they can go into extremism of radicalization, violent extremism, or they can adopt a very liberal, so-called progressive view, where they're now interpreting texts, explaining it away themselves, because they've got an audience, a community that's come in with them and is one stage behind them. That's why it's a very, very sensitive and crucial stage. And those at that stage, just like the ones at the founding stage, are in need of those who are a step or two ahead, having gone through this process and come through it.
Brother Aqil, go take a shot.
Well, here's my first thought. My first thought is there is a gap that becomes created between those in the youthful stage and those who are in the adult stage. And those that are in the youthful stage will often view those in the adult stage as lacking to some degree, right? So yet they still need those who are in the adult stage, and those who are in the adult stage still need their zeal and energy to put forth the effort from the vision that they have. So that becomes a question of how do we bridge that gap, number one, and number two, how do we continue to provide correct and balanced guidance to those that are in this youthful stage of zeal?
Brother Nafis?
Yes, I actually I agree. I'm waiting for you to add some more there.
Good question. When you look at that model, okay, it's only at the adult stage and the more mature stage that you actually see reflection taking place. Reflection of earlier stages of the self, of the community, and adjusting.
I think we starting to lose him there, huh?
Yeah, he come back on. There we go. We got him back in.
We got two of them.
Yeah, two of them here now. I'm gonna be getting.
I'm gonna be prepared. MashaAllah. Go ahead. I'm with you.
That's the mature stage. At the mature stage, you start duplicating yourself, huh?
Correct, right?
One of the things, what's happened? I don't know what happened. My Mac just decided to update. Alhamdulillah, I've got my laptop here, so that's why I had it prepared. So literally, as I said, at the adult stage and the mature stage, you come to a point of reflection. If you look at the model, you two have seen the model, and maybe we'll have to share that with those in the groups that we're in. But they're reflective stages that they look at and modify aspects of behavior, belief that were the earlier two stages. How you bridge that gap is that those at these particular stages have to provide an environment of awareness to those who are converting, those who are at these earlier stages, that they are going to move through these stages. Now, some may say they may not want to hear this theoretical stage and model. We have hadith, we have athar of, I think, Ibn Masud, where there's the narration that youth is a branch of foolishness. Now, and there's a period of activity and inactivity. And this needs to be something that is part and parcel of the education of the community and of new Muslims, reverts, so they understand that where you are now, you're not going to remain at. Not just socio-economically and everything, but socio-religiously, mentally, academically, spiritually. And that we know from the hadith, and Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah know this, we expound upon it. Not unlike the deviant groups, the iman fluctuates, it goes up and down. These things need to be taught in the context of what we're discussing today, because we've seen, as I said, there are two extremes. You will see individuals feeling that they've got a great sense of iman, but that iman is tempered by exuberance, for which vulnerability is there and extremism can creep in if they're not grounded. Then on the other side, you'll have those who cannot keep up with that exuberance and become more liberal to the extent that they stop practicing the deen. So if we look at the framework that I'm discussing, but we have to make sure that is what it's enshrouded in are these athar, are these narrations and scholarly edicts about Iman moving up and down. So they understand where they are. They understand when changes take place, what is happening, and there's no cause for alarm because it's something that has been prophesized. It's there in the deen, and communities and individuals who have progressed beyond those stages are there to advise them and say, we've gone through the same thing. That's how we bridge that gap.
Brother Aqil.
Okay, so if we look into the mindset of the individual who is in the youthful stage, and a part of this is going to echo what you're saying, and I'm actually being reflective of myself and of others throughout the years.
Right.
I believe the word for it is cognitive dissonance, in that you are building up, or rather, as you embrace the faith and move further into the faith, you are reshaping your reality. And you're reshaping your reality internally. You're reshaping your reality through your perception of what reality should be, right? There's a retraining process the person goes through. Yet, once you get to a certain space in that retraining of your perception of what reality should be, sometimes what you're seeing in the books, or what you understand from what you see in the books and what's being conveyed to you, it conflicts with what you see in front of you at present real time, right? So that creates a contradiction. So at that point, psychologically, the individual has to rationalize that some type of way. You got to make it. You have to make it right some type of way. So I say that to say, at the point where the individual realizes that and is trying to rationalize it, I believe that is the point where an individual may diverge into one of those three areas that you mentioned, of negligence, balance, or extremism. So for me, that makes the question, how do we identify, well, if you both agree with this point so far anyway, how do we identify exactly when the individual is at that stage in order to hone in so that they become or remain balanced, and then we can guide them through before they become negligent, or as you say, liberal, or become extreme and excessive.
Uh, just to add, what I understand is that I think,
and I say this, well, let me say that, and I don't mean to cut you off. I say this because experientially, many times when you come across people that are in this stage and you seek to inform them, they don't believe you. And they will see you as an other. You follow?
Yes.
But go ahead, Nafis. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this answer has been provided in the Islamic structure in the first place. And I know you guys might say, what is he talking about? Okay, there is a developmental stage that's taking place as far as proper tarbiyah. And Aqil, you touched on this a couple of times, and I'm going to mention it again. And I understand that because we live in this society, and I know that there are branches between this or that. Okay, let me just make my point. An individual who comes in needs to be guided directly to someone who can properly cultivate them. There is a cultivational stage that needs to take place. If we can at the beginning connect them to that proper tarbiyah, we maybe don't have to take time to identify at which point they are at those stages, because they will have a proper guidance from the beginning. If we can catch them before they are influenced, as Brother Hawk Baker is saying, before they become influenced about taking any of those three paths, and two of them being extreme, okay, one of negligence and one of being, you understand what I'm saying, extreme, if we can just direct them. So what I wanted to mention is that there is change. In order to bring about change, there's an effective change and then there's an ineffective change. So an effective change comes about two ways. And it's important, it's imperative that the person understand that the first way is the only way the second one is going to come about. And that is how Islam actually teaches us in regards to what? A spirituality change. That the external is not affected unless what? Internally, the person begins to what? Make a change. So if you understand Islam from that perspective, that there is a connection between the creator and the servant, and that internally thing that must be internalized in order to bring about a external transformation, that brings about an effective change. An ineffective change is when you start from the external, like social, like everything besides Tawheed, besides Akida, etc., right? And you start on everything else and you worry about everything else. What about society? What about this? What about that? Then you cause harm and that you don't bring about that change. And that's why Islam, if you look at it in the earlier days, it started focusing on the spiritual before the physical. Brother Aqil, you can actually understand that, right? It started from the spiritual side first before dealing with the physical side. That's just my thing. I just think that we
Brother
need to try to connect them from the beginning.
Jazakallah khair. What you said is beautiful, and I say yet only yesterday because I had my inset day off to train one of the schools. I did professional development, and I do something which is called cognitive engagement. Okay, something I've designed for the Muslims, predominantly Muslim staff, but for all staff. And I looked at the inner self yesterday because I wanted them to reflect that you can't come to work not bringing the best you to work. Even though there are issues that you may have, you need to know how to compartmentalize them and bring the best you to work. And then when you're going home, you need to bring the best you to your partner, your wife, your husband. And I introduced in that concept after doing this workshop and getting them to do some activities and everything. I looked at 4 dimensions. I asked them to speak about what they saw the mind was, what well-being, mental health, the heart, what it meant to them, the body, and the soul. And then I put up a diagram because there's a theoretical paper that I read, an academic paper I read, in which, and it was done by a Muslim, not Salafi, but what they'd written was citing Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah and the like. And they spoke about, they brought a diagram which highlighted a model with the Akhirah and Allah being at the above this. Then at the bottom, opposite, and not polar opposite like good and evil, the dunya wise, they had shaitan and dunya. They had in the middle there, I'm going to show you briefly the diagram shortly. They had, in the middle there, they had the ruh, the qalb, the aql, and the nafs. And the dynamics that pull at those things will be the upper part pulling at the ruh would be the fitra, okay? And you'd have nafs al-mutma'inna, you'll have munjiyat. Then you would have at the bottom, ghafla being heedlessness, and pulling in that direction towards shaitan, the mukhilat, the causing disease of the heart, the nafs al-amara bisul. And in the middle there, to be what you're saying, to be dealing with those aspects, there's the nafs al-lawama. You know, there are 3 types of nafs. Nafs al-amara bisul, nafs al-lawama, nafs al-mutma'inna. But you've got the jihad al-nafs there, and the taskiyat al-nafs. Now, I'm getting all technical here because I think the audience will know these things here. But this diagram, when I saw this lecture and I watched the individual give it in Turkey, and he was building on these components because he was talking about psychology, and he's saying that non-Muslim psychologists do not look at these aspects, and that Muslim psychologists cover the whole self, the heart, the environment, the soul, the ruh, all of these aspects, the aql. And I'm just going to briefly show, you can see here, that's the diagram, okay, very detailed, okay? But when I brought that to them, I saw it had a profound effect on them in that I said, how many of us deal with ourselves? What do the hadith say? What does Allah say in the Quran? Allah swears, وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ, okay? He swears by the off-reproaching soul, the self-blaming soul. So I said, what you're saying, the reason I'm bringing this now, as you were bringing, you saw me lean back to pull this because I had it on my shelf. This is exactly correct what you're saying. And moving to the framework that I developed, you won't need to identify, as you said, or spot these individuals if the curricular structure from the very beginning encapsulates, incorporates the aspects you're saying about the self. Why did we come to the deen? Those who came for political reasons, to marry a woman, and we know actions are judged by intention, that you get what you're rewarded for. Many of us came to the deen, Islam, to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of us came to Islam to change ourselves. Many of us came to Islam because of the truth of and the efficacy of what it was speaking about in Tawheed. And in order for us to understand and comprehend Tawheed, we have to undergo what you've mentioned. We have to endure what you've mentioned, that inner change, that cleanliness, that learning about the self and our connection with regards to ubudiyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I mentioned ubudiyah because non-Muslims believe in rububiyah. Non-Muslims believe in some of the asma wa sifat, just like the Quraysh, but they rejected, they resisted the ubudiyah. That's what differentiates the non-Muslims and the Muslims, that they reject that third aspect of Tawheed. So I'm elaborating on what you said because, as I said, it's beautiful for what you said. And I hope that the audience and those who are listening can understand the profundity of what you've just mentioned. Because many of us come into the deen and we move into the second stage, the youthful stage, and we have not addressed ourselves spiritually, not even 10%. Hence the problems, the fitna that we see amongst our communities, the disconnect that we have with wider society, because there's a disconnect between our physical, external looking body and the internal, which we've neglected.
Brother Aqil, that was beautiful, brother Dr. Hart Baker. I appreciate that.
Very much so. Very much so. Quite profound. What I would add to that is, to your point, Dr. Baker, and to your point, Nafis, as well. There has to be a continual self purification process that is focused on, and we often become hyper focused on information, which we then associate with knowledge and becoming a person of knowledge, and then we will believe that in and of itself is spirituality. And being knowledgeable and being spiritual aren't necessarily one and the same thing. The knowledge is a tool that allows us to practice spirituality, but it's not spirituality itself, right? It is a means of worship, but it is not worship itself or the entire of worship, right? The quest for knowledge. The quest for knowledge is the act of worship, right? But it's not all of worship itself. So I say that to say many people at this particular stage, we find many people think that you have to be a talib ilm, you have to be a disciple of knowledge in order to be religious. You have to be on the path of scholarship, in order to be truly righteous. And these are distinctions I believe that we do need to make. And I believe that this can come by what you're saying, Brother Nafis, by way of proper mentorship and coaching, but also by way of support groups, meaning that every time you come to the masjid, it can't just be about classes and information, right? It can't just be about that. There have to be other spiritual exercises that are taking place, and we also need some form of secular exercise and entertaining exercises as well, so that we're being human beings and we're actually living throughout all aspects of life, right? A portion of that may be some form of professional training or access or networking amongst ourselves. It must be what we came to Islam for. It must be an entire way of life, right? It must be an entire way of life. And when we don't have that, when we don't see that, when we're not experiencing that, I think that's when we look to fill in that void with other things that may not be helping us and may not be getting us to where we want to go. But it can definitely be workshops like what Dr. Baker is saying, having a workshop that shows that there is a connection between all of these things, and all of these things do fit on a spectrum, and then learning how to interact one with the other and intertwine one with the other.
Yeah, but you do agree that there is a beginning process of all of that, correct?
Absolutely.
And that one will help you. Actually, one should take lead and guide you to be able to make those connections upon that spectrum that you was mentioning. Um, Another thing is that I believe in the youthful stage, or even in any of the stages that you mentioned, with the youthful stage specifically, because of the abstract knowledge, I really honestly believe that we need to realize that what is Islam, and I think this should be something focused at every stage, but more so in this beginning stage. What is Islam about? A lot of people, when they come into Islam, they still have no idea or concept what is Islam about. And Dr. Hawk talked about that. A person might lean more to negligent. He might liberal. A person might lean more to this because of the person that's influencing them. And that's not what they might have entered Islam for. But they have a concept of what they believe Islam is about, what they might have heard or what might have attracted them, but they really don't know what Islam is. So I think that at that stage is why it's important that they are guided to someone who has that proper understanding, as you were saying, with support groups and things like that, to give them what is Islam. Islam is all about surrendering. And I think, and what I mean by that is Allah Jalla wa Ala tells Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Quran, Kul, say, Inna salati, that my prayer, manusuki, my sacrifice, my haya, my yahya, my living, my mati, my dying, is all for Allah, right? And there is no partners to be, la sharika lahu, I don't join any partners associated with him. And with that, I have been commanded to be the first of the Muslimin. If you look at that, what Allah was telling Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to say, which in turn, the scholars of tafsir mentioned that what applied to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in this verse also applied to his followers, correct? So anyway, this is what Islam is about: total submission. You don't have control over the will. If the servant empties their cup when coming in, this will help them out better. Islam is a connection between them and the Creator. And I think most people forget this phase. So then it becomes more about them and the person that's teaching them. More about them and whatever they want to get from Islam, or what they want to impress on others. Whatever they got from the environment, whatever they got from, that's what I think it becomes about. And it don't become a journey between the Creator, the servant towards their Creator. You understand?
That's exactly the point that you're making, brother Nafis, mashallah. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was last on, remember we looked at and discussed where is an example of the Prophet Sallallahu joining the Ansar and the and I'm not saying we have to emulate that in its entirety, but we have one problem. We only provide mentorship and counseling when mental health issues, breakdowns, and depression come in. Why is it a reactionary thing that we have? The brother's going through stress, the sister's had a breakdown, divorce, she's got many children, or the brother's been separated from his children, or he can't cope. But you know what? Now we need to find a Muslim counselor. But hey, there are not enough Muslim counselors. So we then need to go back out into the wider society and go to non-Muslim counselors. And one of the first things the non-Muslim counselors do in the UK, I'm sure in America, they won't just come up with the horns and tell you it's Islam, but they will speak to you about values that you are missing and things that you may have liked, and triggering past memories where you were happy as a child, as a non-Muslim. And they will say, don't you think you should be starting to look and do all of that again? So then that individual starts moving in that particular direction, because there's a gap from the community and what his or her understanding is in the deen. There's nothing proactive that, like, okay, you've become a Muslim now. Here's the toolkit, but it's not just a book. Here's brother such and such, or brothers such and such. Here are sisters. Not here's their number, here's their WhatsApp message, start a WhatsApp group. Like, brother, let's go for dinner. Sister, let me come and see you. What's happening? As you said, brother Aqil, as well, the entertainment side, because I'm going to put something here which is quite profound. I saw in what was happening with Daesh. None of us subscribe to Daesh. No one does. But there were those who were quietly admiring from mainstream Muslims the fact that they'd set something up and they could see the little cubs, as they would call them, running around, being mujahideen, having haflas out in public and everything like that. They were looking at that from 3,000-4,000 miles away, thinking this was utopia, and that, look, entertainment is there in Islam. That was dystopia. And it's not even how we, as you say in America, it's not even how we get down. So some of the things that we do for entertainment doesn't need to be emulating Arabization or other cultures. We have got things that we've been doing. Okay, we've got to do it with the absence of music. We've got to do it with the absence of alcohol and everything. But we are a people who know how to provide joy, satisfaction, fun within a halal means. And that this is something that has been lacking from our communities. And as you said, Brother Aqil, in order for you to be spiritual, you've got to be a taliba or a talib al-ilm. In order for you to be righteous, you've got to just be on this path of knowledge. And let's look at the effects of that as well. Where are our children? They look at that and say, that's not the model I want to follow. That's not the model I want to follow. And even if it is the model that they want to follow, the societal dictates are that strong that they're being pulled this way and that way by Muslim and non-Muslim peers. So coming back to the point, proactivity and having everything that you've been saying, Brother Nafis, having that foundation, platform, environment where the individual can come in and really know how to embrace the faith with individuals who are going to be there from the beginning, not at the end.
Okay, and I'm going to raise a point here in the form of a question, and it's going to be reflective of the discussions that have been taking place in our in our group with our participants in our community, and that is this: as an individual is going through this stage, and the support is present, the mentorship is present. How much so is it the responsibility of that mentorship and that support to explain to them the challenges that they're going to see in front of them, meaning the ideal that they have may not necessarily be what they witness in front of them in physicality, and these are the differences you are going to see, and don't be dismayed by this, but move forward in this way, right? What I mean to say, how much of the dirty laundry, if at all any, do we think that we should be presenting to those in the youthful stage at this time, so that they're not blindsided when they come into it?
And when you say dirty laundry, Brother Aqil, can you just specify an example for me here? You mean it like far as like the back and forth that goes between the students, or the back and forth that goes between, you know?
I mean, potentially, but for it can be that far, but it can be. Think so. I'm thinking with the mind of a person that's only been Muslim for a couple of years, right? So you learn about a certain way to pray, and you see that in the books, but then you come to you're in the ranks in the masjid, you see something different. You read about Salat al-Jum'ah, its virtue, and how you're supposed to be behaving during the khutbah, and then you come and you see that there are Muslims that are not adhering to those particular areas, right? And it creates somewhat of a conflict, and for certain people, especially when you're newer, that can be a big thing. It's not as simple as, oh, this person may be weak in their practice, or this person may have forgot, or this person just being heedless, or this person is on a spiritual low at this point in time. It's not that. It becomes directly impactful upon the faith of that individual and their perception of Islam, right? Those, I'm using smaller examples, but it can go as far as what you're mentioning, right? It can go as far as
that happens a lot.
You see the Muslims with rose-colored glasses, and then you find out that Muslims are humans, and you find out that and it may not necessarily be something that is sinful per se, but things occur that are untoward, and that's not your idea of what you think a Muslim should be and should be doing, and then it impacts you and your perception of of what you should be doing. And if they're like this and they're further down the line than me, well, what am I really doing here? Right. And if they're doing it, then I can do that. Or if they have been this way for this time and I'm just getting started, I may never get to where I think I should be. Right. These are the examples that
I haven't experienced, but I haven't experienced what you're talking about. So I think I had went to a masjid one time. It was the Eid. It was, you know, it was a foreign masjid. And when I come inside, you know, the brothers, alhamdulillah, the brother was on the microphone and he was saying, you know, the ad card was saying it out loud, and then he had the other people saying it with him. And everything I didn't came across, the information I came across relatively was like, okay, you don't do that. Under no circumstances, this unit says you don't do. I was so extremely upset that I left the masjid. But this was ignorance that I found out later from my behalf, right? That I was incorrect in my stance. But just to relate to what you're saying, I know how that is. When you have a piece of information and you think this is based on your faith, you're like, oh, why is he doing something contradicting to that? This must be innovation, or this must be, you know, and you get so extremely upset because it's conflicting with that. And I have an example in the Deen where Umar ibn Khattab heard another individual recite Quran, and he heard him recite it totally different than what he was taught. And Umar gripped the man up, and he took him to the Prophet. The Prophet said, Umar, let him go. You recite. He said, you're correct. And he told the man to recite. He said, you're correct, right? So I know that naturally you're going to feel some type of way when something foreign comes in to what you haven't, like you said, untoward, or something you haven't came across, right? So I understand. I just wanted to make sure, let you know that I comprehend what you're saying.
I agree. I agree with what you're saying there, Brother Nafis. And I would go one stage further to say, again, from experience, I believe on the whole, it can be very counterproductive if we're going to, in answering that question, I remember seeing it in the group as well, in equipping or seemingly equipping the new Muslim with all the whys and wherefores and what to watch out for and the pitfalls and everything. That can make an individual detract from Islam because he's embraced it knowing this is the truth. And then he embraces it, this is the truth, and then he's told, watch out for this group, that group, this one's munafiq, this, not munafiq, but Ahlul Bid'ah or whatever. What I think needs to happen is it goes back to what we started off with, what Nafis highlighted, that from the first founding stage, that the development is inward, reflective, self-reflective, purification, gaining true knowledge. But like the athlete, you lot know with the basketball stars and the athletes, they train to a peak and they can't show that the result of that until the race. The knowledge is only knowledge when it's acted upon correctly. Otherwise, as my model shows, it's information, it's data. So we need to move them from that gathering of data stage, processing it as information, to implementing it as knowledge. And then when you're on that path of knowledge, when something that does not accord to the deen comes up, you may not know it, you may have doubt about it, but you know the process and methodology to disseminate what this is and where to find out what this is. So again, for me, I believe as they are growing, if they come across something that they're not sure about, then we address it then. But it needs to be addressed correctly. Because if we address it incorrectly, it could become rivalry. Oh, they're only saying that because they're a different group. It needs to be addressed in a nuanced way, explaining with evidence, explaining with context of where they're living, where we're living, how we're living. And then the individual must be left, because like you said in the beginning, Brother Nafis, I think the second thing, there is a responsibility on the new Muslim, on the Muslim, him or herself, to put in some work. We cannot spoon feed them in every instance. So once they've gone through that process of, right, this is the knowledge I've got, I've seen something here, like you did, Brother Nafis. If someone had said to you, if you'd seen it and you thought, okay, this is really strange, I'm not going to leave. I don't feel comfortable about this. I may have a discussion with them to say, I'm a new Muslim. Can you explain this to me? They explain it to you. Then you think, okay, I've got people that I was learning from. I'm going to take the time to go back to them to verify, validate, or invalidate what I've learned or what the information I've taken from these people that I saw this strange practice from. And then the people you go back to who you trust, they don't say, yeah, they're Ahlul Bidah, they're this, they're that. They say, remember Nafis? We was learning Usul Sunnah, such and such and such. And we said, in our context, it looks like this. Go back to that source there, Brother Nafis. Check that out. Let me know. Is it clear to you now? If not, let's look at something else. This is the way that we do the nurturing. This is the way that we should be dealing with them and these questions that come up. I say that because that's how I and the brothers, there are a number of us who came to Deen, about 15 of us, that's how we were dealt with. And we were able to start weighing up and using the tools that we had and then asking the right people the right questions. Because there's ways to ask questions as well on the Deen. Ikhwan, you know this. There's a right way of asking questions and there's a wrong way of asking questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Aqil, can I say one thing?
Go ahead, please.
You said one thing earlier about this concept of humans and realizing that the Muslims are humans, or they are humans, right? I just wanted to just clarify something. Islam takes that in consideration because Islam is a religion for humans, and I know a lot of people don't understand it. It's very, Allah Jalla wa'ala highlights that when he says he didn't send an angel. He sent a, person from amongst them to themselves. He sent a human to them. So taking in that consideration that the laws of Islam applies to humans, the etiquettes and everything, the mannerism of Islam is all about applying to humans. So I just wanted to just bring that out. And before you go, Aqil, we do have some questions up here. So when you're done, I'm just going to start showing the questions up so we can, probably address them before we close out, inshallah.
Sure. I'm just going to give one example, one brief story to kind of demonstrate what I think we're all talking about here. When I was much younger, I was a teenager, and there was a couple that was getting married from the masjid that I regularly attended, but they chose to get married at had the ceremony at a different masjid, and most of the people at that masjid were of a different ethnicity than ourselves. I'll say it that way, and I had an experience that was profound for me. Because, as I mentioned previous, I was raised as a Black nationalist, but then coming into Islam, that challenged some of those ideologies, and I began to adjust those ideologies within myself, right? And the ceremony took place, and there was some celebration taking place. And with this particular, a lot of people were there, were present, probably over 100 people. Inside of a smaller space. It was somewhat packed. So the people that are in the kitchen come out of the kitchen with tea. And I would say 98% of the people present were of a particular ethnicity. And they served the tea. The tea kept coming, myself and my friend, a little older than me, he had preceded me in practicing the faith. We were sitting right next to the door that they were coming out of. They proceeded to serve every single individual the tea and got to us last, right? And that had an impact upon me at that time. I may be 16 years old or something like that, right? Just practicing for a few years, right? Or attempting to practice for a few years at the time. And you can imagine what that might do. I'm thinking, no. It's all the Muslims. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your ethnicity and your race. And it's all about taqwa and who's the most pious. And we're all on this path together. And we're not even seeing color anymore, right? That's the mentality I'm adjusting toward from whence I came, right? And if the brother he's about 20 years older than me. So if I was 16 at the time, he was in his mid 30s at the time, and he had been practicing for a couple years more than me. If he had not been present, and had he not spoken to me after we left from there and balanced me out, that probably could have had an impact upon me that could have taken me down an entirely different life track, right? In my practice of the faith, right? So I say that just to edify everything that both of you have said.
No. I agree with you, and I think that needs to be expounded on in another episode. We need to really go into that topic of understanding the different things that you experience within Islam that has nothing to do with Islam, but it's being done by people who, are practitioners of Islam, or people who have identified with Islam. I think that's going to be a topic. That's content, and I think we should highlight that on just an episode itself, inshallah. What you guys think of that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
The brother said that he felt as though we answered his questions all together, but I think that there was one of these questions up here I want to put up that was mentioned. I think this might be it. Let's see.
Okay, well, I'll read the question and I'll allow you both to respond. This is from the Muslim chaplain, our dear brother, our dear respected brother, Chaplain Antigua. May Allah preserve you. When teaching Aqidah in Salah, when teaching theology and prayer, how do we get the quote unquote youthful to focus on this when they're being confronted in person and online with the daily life legislative issues, fiqh, jurisprudence, do's and don'ts? What are they to be told?
I think that's a very good question. If Brother Nafis, you let me go first on that. Very good question. This is where, and I think that the Muslim chapter is talking about the youthful stage individuals, if I understand the question correctly. This is where those of us and communities that are at the adult or mature stages, the stages of actualization, have to have a context and framework in place to show these young men and women and children that from the founding stage, they will inevitably move to a stage of actualization. I think some may not be grasping what Nafis mentioned about the spiritual side, because when we start actualizing Tawheed, just think about that for a moment. When we start actualizing Tawheed, as the Sahaba did, it cannot do anything but transform every aspect of your life. And when that takes place, the Salah, the prayer, is a go-to part of your day that you just simply cannot compromise. You both know what I'm speaking about, and how the Salah is intrinsic to our functioning. The narration that mentions that if you miss the Fajr prayer or pray the Fajr prayer late, then the rest of your day is accented by lateness. These aspects here need to be really infused in the youth, and examples need to be given. The example you gave, Brother Aqil, was a beautiful example. Nafis, what you've mentioned, I think the examples we're giving, these real life actualized experiences, need to be shared with the youth. Now, they may not act upon it immediately, but when they come up with circumstances that are very acute, these may serve as reminders to say, this is what I should be doing. This is why this problem is happening, because I've neglected this. I didn't comprehend that. I was negligent in this particular area. So when it comes to the Aqidah and prayer issues, these are fundamentals upon which we exist as Muslims. And if we do not make the young individuals or encourage them to really dive deep and understand this, then we're a non-starter. And again, I've referred to Sheikh Tahir Wyatt's lectures on Tawheed. And I used to listen to them going to work. I know Brother Tahir, we're very close, mashallah, tabarakallah. But I will say still now to you all, as brothers and sisters, listen, I have not heard any series of lectures delivered in the US or anywhere in the West as comprehensive as those, to the extent that when I was listening to some of the lectures on particular attributes, I had to think about when I mentioned those attributes in my salah, the full comprehensive extent of what I'd heard Sheikh Tahir had been speaking about. And it made me not even move on to, at some point, making the other du'as parrot fashion and just making the literally Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. And the explanations and the depth of the explanations behind those, because that's very rarely done in the English language. So we don't have the opportunity to grasp the depth and breadth of the meanings of these of Tawheed and the importance of Salah. So Muslim chaplain, I think it's a fantastic question. I'm sorry I may have elaborated a bit more, but I think the actualization and the focus on these within a contextualized setting of those individuals, those youthful stage individuals, is what is needed. It was done to us. I know there's social media. We had all of the things that are pulling us left, right, and center. Then what we need to do is let them know that in a face-to-face setting, and we need to show them these alternatives, like Sheikh Tahir White, like some of the lectures that you've both been given, providing context, so that individuals can see they may not be watching and listening all of the time, but when they feel I need to fall back on something, as I mentioned earlier, they have someone who's guided them where to fall back to.
May Allah preserve Sheikh Tahir. Just to dovetail what you've mentioned, and to speak to Chaplain Antigua's point in his question, when these types of legislative issues of variance do come up, and then they present them to us, trying to figure them out, I believe that we should be very forward with them that yes, this exists. However, this isn't necessarily where you are and what is best for you at this time, and then redirect them back to what is most comprehensive for them, which is going to be Aqidah and Salah, spirituality and prayer. However, as an exercise in mental stimulation, we can express some of what exists, just to show the beauty of Islam, just to show the width and the depth of Islam and the applicability of Islam to all areas of life, right? And then utilize that to bring it back to the spiritual, as opposed to just academically going through an issue where there are 3 to 5 different views on that particular issue and how we practice it.
No. And I just want to say last here, there is a difference between a Western approach in their educational system, and an approach religiously in the Islamic approach to education. Normally, when you look at a Western approach education, sometimes you see that they don't really focus too much on mannerism, etiquettes. This is not their concern. Spirituality is really not many their concern. If you look at some of the things they explain to you, it's really about establishing your career. You understand, it's economically and so forth, socially and things like that, which you get within that particular understanding, academic. But when you look at Islam from the onslaught, everything is about a connection between you and the Creator. So mannerisms is included, adab, etiquettes, all of these things are included within you learning within Islam.
Can I add it, Nafis? Can I? Because that's an important thing you've said there, but we need to put a caveat there, because what we've seen is that with Islam, those who may not have come from a structured background, whatever it be, academic, business-wise, whatever, they then take advantage of the vastness of Islamic knowledge and learning. And as we've seen, they take smatterings of information and expound it as knowledge.
Hold on 1 second for you. That's why I was going to explain this. That's why when I mentioned earlier to you guys, this is why when the scholars confront this issue, this is why they mention is you have to have a Rabbani. And I know you guys are going to say, well, what if you don't have a Rabbani? We in the West. We don't have no Rabbani person like that, right? But if you have a person who understands the concept of learning from someone who's Rabbani, he's going to teach you with those smaller issues, sort of what Aqil was just saying. Instead of bombarding you with all the different views of opinions, and you're not at that stage, it's going to become confusing. And if I understand that I have a teacher who understands that, whereas though he's not going to go into those different nuances to cause me confusion. You understand? He's going to teach me from step A, step B, you know what I'm saying, and bring me up. You understand? And you might have people who are educated, who might have a academic education that want more of that. They're thirsty for more of that. So he says you give them a little taste of that to show them that Islam does cover those areas,
Right.
but you don't go into elaborating on those details. So that's more than what I want to say, that you need to connect the youth to the scholars.
Yes.
Right? And I'm not saying just scholars in the West, the East and everything like that. I'm saying connect them to someone who can bring them up through a process that they can begin to learn step by step. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we don't have a systematic way of learning. That's why we are bombarded by everything. Like Brother Aqil was saying, you online, somebody hits you with a legislation thing. Last but not least, which scholar was this, Aqil, that he was told you cannot offer, and it's interesting, it goes with Atika question. He was told that you cannot offer, he was told to offer 2 rak'at, right? 2 units of prayer when coming into the masjid, right? Before sitting down. Tahiyatul masjid, right? And then he was told on another occasion that you don't do it, right? In result of this, it caused him to be what? To go learn and to become a scholar, right?
Yeah, Ibn Hazm.
There you go. Al-Asqalani, right? And Brother Atika, this is exactly why he went to go learn. So I think the remedy in that, when you're bombarded and sidetracked with all this different stuff, you must be at the stage of keep learning, because you're gonna begin, inshallah, to understand that. Inshallah. You want me to put one more up, or we done? We can.
I'm good. It's up to you, as you like. We don't want to. If we don't want to overdo it, I know sometimes we've overshot. So as you like, inshallah.
All right. I like the wording here, so I want to see what y'all brothers got to say.
The question here is from our sister Kali Khadija Merritt. It states, judging groups is extremely dangerous to a new Muslim. At the onset, religious trauma is being introduced.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair, sister Kali Khadija Merritt, for saying that. And that's why we don't do it. We shouldn't do it. I don't subscribe to that at all, based on what we've discussed today. And that's become, in many of our communities, the introductory or baptism of fire, I'll say metaphorically speaking, and non-Christian sense, what happens to new Muslims. Mashallah tabarakallah, when I came to Deen in 1990 and was being taught by Sirat Abdul Malik, rahimahullah, and others, Sheikh Suleiman Abdul Sabor, hafidahullah, elders in our community, we were taught Tawheed, Sunnah, learning short surahs every week, and they saw where we were coming from. And they saw we were coming from a place of rivalry, gang-related incidents where the rivalry and violence was just at the doorstep. So imagine, and I dare say it's similar for many of you in America. Imagine we are then told, because it happened when that there are these groups that are astray. Because when that happened, while we were upon the Sunnah, that militancy that we still had, and to some degree possess now, but there's that mature stage, adult stage among us, we embarked or endeavored to embark upon roads that would have been devastating if we'd connected our jahiliyyah with the same ideas and impetus to go after groups that were deemed antithetical to Islam or astray. And alhamdulillah, and I'll say this, and we are men here and we have women among us who are watching. If it wasn't for the deen, what has happened with regards to this internecine fighting and things that have happened in some of our communities? And I say this, and others will watch this. If it hadn't been for the deen, many of those individuals know there would be a totally different outcome that they themselves were not used to and would avoided experiencing before Islam. And I'm not saying that by way of bravado. I think Sister Kali's point is a very emphatic point. Alhamdulillah that we're on the deen and that we've grown on the deen and we've acquired knowledge on the deen, because it's those things that have stopped the annihilation of what would have been rivals before we were Muslim. So I come back to the point I made. There is no stage in the beginning as Sister Kali's highlighting, to introduce such trauma to individuals. I've seen the results of that. I've seen the violent outcomes of that, and to the self, not me, but to individual selves, to others, and psychologically. And we have brothers and sisters that we visit in mental institutions now because of the trauma that was connecting them to a past life, because they looked one in the same, but one was just being dressed up as Islam and say, we are Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be very brief here. To your point, and to the sister's point, this is why in the onset, we should teach the truth. We should teach concept. We should teach principle. This is Tawheed. This is Shirk. This is Sunnah. This is Bid'ah. And allow the person to develop knowing that. And then once they have that firm, eventually, when they come into some of these other challenges, they'll be able to recognize them for themselves and either be able to navigate it or be ready to accept it and present it to you, prepared for further guidance.
Right.
No, barakallahu feek. So alhamdulillah, this was a good episode. Alhamdulillah, we touched on a lot of discussions. Inshallah ta'ala, next week, hopefully you guys, we'll go into the next, we might expand more and go on to the next one. So inshallah ta'ala, I thank everyone for their feedback on the Fajr Club. Continue to give your feedback. There's some interesting questions that being posted. We'll try to make sure we answer some of those questions, inshallah. But like I said, just remember, brothers and sisters, this is a personal journey. This is a connection between you and your Lord. There, and you don't forget that. There is a connection between you and your Lord. Okay, tight. Brother Atika, you probably want to post that in the Fajr Club so that we can probably take a look at that there, inshallah. We're going to conclude with the show. This is your brother Nafis Abu Zaid.
This is your brother Aqil Ingram.
This is your brother Abdul Haq Baker.
Thank you guys for tuning in to the Fajr Club, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for anything that was incorrect or incorrectly said. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.